good buddy John Mittendorf's in the studio. He works with Answers in Genesis, and we've been talking about one of the most fascinating topics ever, and that is the pyramids. And everybody thinks they're just big diamond-type
piles of stone.
Piles of stone out in the desert, and there's a bunch of bones inside.
Well,
I mean, that's what everybody thinks, right? You know,
that's exactly right. The first part is right. Big piles of stones, 500 feet high.
Yeah.
No bones inside.
No bones inside.
All the bones are in the Valley of the Kings.
All right.
You know, when we did our program last month, Perry, and we started talking about the pyramid, and when I say the pyramid, I'm talking about the Great Pyramid Khufu.
Right.
And what we're talking about doesn't apply to all the rest of them.
Okay.
Because Khufu is the only one they've been inside of. Some of the other ones they've been underneath, but they haven't been inside. So what we're talking about may or may not be applicable.
Yeah.
But after the program last month, a lady called up and had a great question. It's one of the questions that I get quite often.
Yeah.
Along with the question, so what happened to all of their technology? That is a very common question.
Right.
But her question was, why can't we assemble one and put it to the test?
Yeah.
That is a great question. So I did a little research, and I want to keep this quote in context.
Okay.
This quote comes from architect James Hagen, and he's a renowned architect. He's the guy that designed Walt Disney Shopping Village in Florida, the Sanford Stadium at University of Georgia, the MARTA Station in Georgia, and so on.
Wow.
This guy's been around. This is his quote regarding the Great Pyramid. It would be impossible to build a Great Pyramid today using modern building methods. We don't have the technology, the ability to duplicate what the Egyptians did.
Yeah, I think you have to stop, folks. You just need to stop and think about this. These stones are huge. They came from hundreds of miles away. The precision to cut them and place them is beyond anything we can do today, and they're within fractions of a
20 thousandths, well, 10 thousandths of an inch. So when you put two stones together, they're a maximum of 20 thousandths of an inch, and you've probably heard the phrase, you can't stick a thin blade knife between the stones.
There you go.
And that applies in Mexico also to the Mayan temple. So it was a worldwide technology. But anyway, I did a little extra research and come to find out that the Japanese Nippon Company Corporation, 1978, tried to build one.
Oh, really?
Yes, they did. And although it was only 60 feet tall.
Instead of 500 feet tall.
Instead of 500 feet, they never finished it.
Oh.
Because the technical difficulties overwhelmed them. And they got permission from the Egyptian government to quarry the stones just like the Egyptians did. They had to drag them across the sand, and finally they resorted to helicopters trying to lift the stones into place, and it was a mess, and so they just said, we'll go build cars instead of pyramids.
And they do that very well.
Yeah.
Well,
and then Nova, TV Nova program, tried it also. Theirs was only 20 feet tall. But they fudged a little bit because they used front loaders and they used steel tools and implements, and they also backed away from it. They said, you know, we can't do this. And so the Egyptians did something that, that really we can't do today. In fact, I came across another quote, and I want to quote this because I want to get it right. Evidence that the ancient Egyptians used tools such as straight saws, circular saws, lathes, and tubular drills, that's for drilling, have been recognized for over a century to machinists.
Really?
For global machinists. They know that they've done that.
All right, and that provokes the question, how did they do it?
And
how did they build it? And it certainly suggests that they had some kind of technology that
we're not aware of.
We're not aware of. But was it electricity centered?
It appears to be. And this falls under the category of Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Mittendorf's Believe It or Not.
Mittendorf's Believe It or Not. Because, you know, you can say, well, okay, here's what we see. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and, you know, and so on, it probably is. But what is plainly obvious is that the Great Pyramid was not built as a funerary device. It, in reality, was likely built as a machine.
Okay.
Believe it or not. Yeah. And if I can have the #1 graphic brought up, which is a diagram of the pyramid, and we'll have to explain this to the people that are listening, not watching. What you have inside the pyramid's about 500 feet tall, and inside you have numerous passageways, and you have a device that looks like, what would you say, Perry? It looks like a little house with a roof on the top.
Right.
And then underneath that is something similar to it, that's a lot smaller. And we're going to get to that in just a minute because we're going to raise the bar this morning a little bit. And if I can look at diagram number 3, which is a close-up, this is a device that's in the pyramid. In fact, Steve Johnson has been in the pyramid and walked in and looked at this.
Okay.
And you can today. It's a device, the pyramid is made out of limestone, and this is called the King's Chamber. It's made out of pink granite. Pink granite is high in crystalline quartz.
Okay.
And we know that crystalline quartz, if you mechanically squeeze it, it will produce electricity. Okay. This device that's in the pyramid is also quite large, and the entire device that you see on the screen, it looks like a tall house with a roof on the top.
Right.
That entire device is made out of pink granite that was shipped there from Aswan 500 miles away, but yet the rest of the pyramid is made out of cheap limestone.
Okay.
So why would they do that? And they know today, after NASA has taken electronic devices inside the King's Chamber, that when they scale up through the frequency spectrum, when they reach 438 cycles per second, which is F-sharp chord, that the beams that you saw in that drawing, and there's 43 beams, 70 tons each that are suspended, all of them have been hand-hewn to vibrate at F-sharp chord.
That's just amazing.
Yes. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would they do that?
Yeah.
And a lot of the information on this pyramid, I mean, we're supposing here.
Okay.
But you have to ask yourself, why did they do that, and why did they do that to a precision that is only found in machinist laboratories, not in building construction? And there's a reason for that. And they did it for a reason. So anyway, so what you're looking at is...
By the way, that King's Chamber moves, doesn't it?
The King's Chamber is suspended inside the pyramid. It's sitting on, and the walls are surrounded by what would look like an egg crate.
Right.
And so it's really suspended inside the pyramid from the rest of the limestone blocks that are inside the pyramid. Now, if the frequency of the Earth is F-sharp chord, 438 cycles, because the Earth rotates and it wobbles a little bit on its axis, the frequency of the Earth is 438 cycles per second. NASA knows that. If the pyramid was designed to also vibrate at F-sharp chord, 438 cycles per second, it then becomes a coupled oscillator. And what that means, Perry, is that it takes the vibrations from the Earth, and if it takes it into a crystalline quartz and you vibrate the crystalline quartz, it turns those oscillations into an electromechanical energy.
All right, so... boy.
It boggles the mind, doesn't it?
It does, because is it possible then the F-sharp inside the pyramid parallels the F-sharp of the Earth at the same time?
Yes.
And it produces some kind of electrical current?
Electromechanical current, energy.
Okay.
Or a microwave energy.
Does that suspend gravity?
Well, I don't know. It's possible. And you know, that's a question that's come up. And I want to save time because I want to go to Gattenbrink's door, which is a discovery they've made last year, which almost supersedes what we just talked about inside the pyramid. But let me talk about gravity. One of the questions I get quite frequently is, okay, John, it's obvious this was not a funerary device. Then how did they move all of those stones? In fact, they know the Egyptians were capable of lifting 20,000 tons. Today, we're only capable of lifting 1,300 tons. They lifted 20 times more than we can today. This is 2013. This is 2,500 years before Christ. And you can find the same technology in Mexico, the Mayans, same thing, rocks all over the world that are just huge pieces of granite that are immense and have been perfectly cut and fit together. So the question comes, how did they do that? And I forgot to mention when we started that basically what we're talking about, it's fun to talk about it and it's secular, but it also points straight at the Bible. Because if ancient man was smart, a derivative of Adam and Eve, shouldn't we see evidence of that? We do. Whereas modern archaeology or secular archaeology says, no, we evolved, and so you shouldn't see ancient technology. But we do, and that's why in archaeology it's called OPARTs, O-O-P-A-R-T-S, out-of-place artifacts. In other words, they shouldn't be there. But they are. But they are.
All right. All right, we got some more pictures, some more fascinating discussion about what's going on inside the Big Pyramid, and to scratch your brain with. We'll be right back with John Mittendorf.
Thanks.
Well, the Great Pyramid is a fascinating discussion. And by the way, John Mittendorf will come to your church or your service club or wherever and lecture on this material. All you got to do is get a hold of us here at theDove. We'll put you in contact with John. We're talking about the Great Pyramid and what really is inside and the fascinating construction that cannot be duplicated. Many attempts, but hasn't happened.
Hasn't worked yet. So you asked just very briefly, Perry, how did they move the stones? And I think an answer to that is they did not move them using the methods that we use today. If you go to Bonneville Dam, we have the huge cranes to lift the generators out of the dam. As I said, they're limited to about 1,300 tons. They were doing 20,000 tons. And the one perspective on that if they were capable of reversing gravity, then it doesn't make any difference how big something is or how much it weighed. It was basically weightless. And what appears to give that credibility, and people that are listening and watching this morning can go on the internet and just go to the Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida. And an African immigrant came over in the 50s, and he always boasted, "I know how the Egyptians did it." And it's well documented that he built this castle in Homestead, Florida, which is now a visitor center. He passed away. And he was using blocks of granite, 35 tons or less. And it's well documented that he used no machinery to place these in place on his property. That he would have them delivered at night, the truckers would leave, they would come back the next morning, the trucks were empty, and there's the blocks in place on his property. And he always boasted, "I know how to do it." And the only two things that are left in his laboratory on the premises are items that have to do with electromechanical devices. And electricity and magnetism is 33 times stronger than gravity. And evidently, that's basically what he was using.
So if you I'm just thinking theoretically, you suspend that.
Correct.
You remove gravity.
Correct.
Okay.
Then it doesn't make a difference how much it weighs.
Right.
They know that there's 2.3 million blocks in the pyramid. If they built the pyramid in somewhere between 10 to 20 years, they're not positive, but it's less than 20 years. By the way, using modern methods, if we were to quarry the stone today, just quarry and deliver the stone to the site today, it would take us 27 years to do that. They did it and built the pyramid in less than 20. You have to think about that for a minute.
Something's going on.
Something's going on here.
Right.
Anyway, so the question is, okay, what happened to all our technology? And that's a great question because nobody knows. The only artifact that lasts over time is gold. Everything else will oxidize and tend to waste away. Wood, of course, doesn't last very long at all. And of course, they could have destroyed it. They could have hid it. I mean, it's a great question. Okay, where's all our technology? And of course, nobody knows. Anyway, so there's a fascinating perspective that they just discovered in the pyramid last year because Zawi Hawass, he's in charge of Egyptian antiquities, closed everything down. I don't want to know too much here. But last year he opened it back up again. And if I can, let's bring the graphic up of the pyramid, which is number one.
Number one?
Number one.
All right.
Yep.
Get it there.
And if you look at that little, what appears to be a little house down towards the bottom of the pyramid, it's called the Queen's Chamber. You see two passageways, one to the left and one to the right, and they go from what's called the Queen's Chamber to outside the pyramid.
Okay.
Okay. Back in 1978, a German engineer called, oh boy, the name just left me. Let me look at my notes here real quick. Gattenbrink. Gattenbrink designed a robot to go inside, and the passageway is 8 by 8 inches. They're very small. He designed a little robot to go inside to see what's in there. Well, the robot went up until it came to a curve, and the robot couldn't go around the curve, and so then they were stuck. So here's the deal. Well, I wonder what's in there. They then designed another one to go in and go around the corner, which they did last year, which was on television, financed by National Geographic. They came to a door, drilled a hole, and it's called Gattenbrink's door. They drilled a hole through the door, and let's bring up graphic number 4. And this is what they see. That is a door with 2 copper anodes hanging down the front of the door. You will also notice that the one on the left is partially gone. The one on the right is thicker at the top and thinner at the bottom.
Yeah.
They are also sealed in the door with a sealant. All right?
It's not super glue.
It's not super glue. It's like a mastic or an adhesive that seals them in the hole, so it's sealed. Now the question comes, what are copper anodes or electrical devices doing in a door in this passageway? And there's one in the other passageway also. And this is what is theorized, that the Egyptians, believe it or not, had hydrated zinc chloride in one of the passageways, and they had a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid in the other passageways, and there's evidence that's what was there. One of the evidences is when you have those two chemicals and they are exposed to limestone, you produce hydrogen. And the inside of the pyramid was subjected to what they feel is hydrogen, because if you're going to be using oscillations that are directly coupled from the earth to generate electricity, you want the simplest gas in the pyramid to be able to enhance that, and hydrogen only has one atom. So hydrogen, let's say, accentuates the process. Now, if you're generating hydrogen inside the pyramid, what would be a byproduct of the process of generating hydrogen? Say salt incrustation on the walls.
Salt incrustation on the walls,
Right.
yeah.
What do you think the entire Queen's Chamber and some of the passageways out of the bottom of the Queen's Chamber are encrusted with?
Salt.
Salt. How else would you get salt incrustation? And it's nowhere else in the pyramid. It's there. Now, you say, okay, what's that door with those two copper electrodes hanging down?
Yeah.
Because if the passageways are at a 45-degree angle, which they were, if it had a chemical solution in it, if the chemical solution was up to the copper pieces hanging down, they would know what the level of the solution in the passageway was. When the solution dropped down away from the copper, it was time to refill it. Now remember I told you that one of the pieces of copper hanging down is thicker at the top and narrower at the bottom? Wouldn't it make sense? If that's what they were doing, it would be thicker at the top and narrower at the bottom?
Yeah, because the salt would eat it away, wouldn't it?
Well, the erosion would eat it away.
Yeah.
Is exactly right.
Yeah.
Is exactly right.
So, well, this produces a gazillion questions. Where'd they get the solution?
If they were capable of building what we're talking about building, if they were capable of lifting 20,000 tons, to be able to come up with a hydrated zinc chloride solution or hydrochloric acid is simple. That's not a big deal. That's just simple chemistry.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so you're leading to where with this? This goes to, there's something electrically going on in
Okay,
there.
so what we're leading to with this is, did the Egyptians possess a level of technology high enough that they were able to produce electrical energy free from the earth without burning oil and coal and everything else that we do today?
It appears so.
It appears so. And I want to bring up one more picture, and you have to be careful with this picture because there's lots of hieroglyphics that they do not know what they mean, but yet when you look at them you have to ask yourself, where did they get that from? And this is going to be figure number 5.
All right.
And this is in the Temple of Dendro. And let me get this right. It's the Temple of Hathor at Dendro. And this is a hieroglyphic on the wall. This is the drawing. But what's fascinating about it is that you see two Egyptian workers holding what appears to be, and help me describe this for the people that are just listening, Perry.
Well, it's like a big jackhammer.
Well, no, it's like a big light bulb.
Looks like a big light bulb.
Yeah.
Oh, I see the thing coming out the back. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
It looks like a big light bulb, and down at the bottom you have what appears to be like a socket, and out of that, in my background, before I went in the fire service, I was in electrical engineering at Long Beach State College. That is a schematic for high voltage supply, basically.
Okay.
The wire that comes out of the back of the lotus flower that's on the back of what appears to be a tube goes across the floor and goes into a box, just like the other one does also,
Right.
which would be like a power supply.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Now what you said looks like a jackhammer is called a jed, and that is an insulator. They use it for insulation to hold the glass tube. Inside the glass tube you see a snake. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, the snake was a symbol for power and for light. What's fascinating is the snake on the left one goes from the bottom to the top. However, the snake on the right one is being repelled by the Egyptian priest standing outside with what appears to be a metal implement, like a knife. Correct? The snake is turning away.
Right.
That is how an electron tube operates. you divert the electrons inside of an electron tube. Is that the schematic for an electron tube or a light bulb?
A bulb?
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. The point is, whatever it's a schematic of, it has nothing really to do with just your standard Egyptian hieroglyphics of kings and queens and battles and all this stuff. You don't have to stretch your mind very far when you look at it to say that could be some type of an electrical device.
All right, so where is this going to go, John? We got about 2 minutes here. Where is this going to go? I mean, is science going to, and is the Egyptians going to let people get in there and conclude this argument?
It's not going to go very far, Perry, because if the Egyptians or if science were to admit that the Egyptians obtained a level of expertise and knowledge higher than ours today, what would that do to the secular concept or perception of evolution?
It would destroy it.
It would destroy it.
Yeah.
Or help to destroy it.
Right, yeah.
It'd help destroy it. Now, next month, we're going to go back to Egypt again, and we're going to raise the bar. A lot. A lot. We're going to raise the bar to a higher level of technology. If you think the pyramid is an example of advanced engineering and technology, next month we're going to raise the bar.
Is it possible the surrounding pyramids were many of the big one in order to create the electricity to build the big one? In other words, to cut the blocks and move them and stuff like that?
That's been theorized. It's also been theorized that the two smaller pyramids around the big pyramids were used as a donkey engine, like a Caterpillar tractor. You have a donkey engine, you start it, and then you get the bigger engine going.
Right.
They theorize, but they don't know. I mean, they're just theorizing. Everything we've talked about today is theorized, but when you look at it, when 1 + 1 = 2, you have to say, well, there's a high probability that's exactly what they were doing.
All right, less than a minute. How did they know the big pyramid was built in less than 20 years? How did they know that?
Because of some inscriptions on some of the stones and some of the, I'm going to say, the artifacts that they think that they built it in 10 years, but they're fairly positive it was less than 20 years. So somewhere, and they don't know if they were on 8-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, and so on. So
fascinating.
Next month we're going to raise the bar. If you think the pyramid is interesting, we're going to supersede that.
I got to go. But if you want to have John lecture at your church or your group, get a hold of us here at theDove. We'll get you in contact. Thanks, John.
Okay, you bet. Thanks, Perry.
We'll see you next time.